Hey folks, I'm pre-recording today's politics chat because I have to do something when I normally would be going live. Today is June 17th, 2025, and although I didn't ask for questions today, so many people have written this week, I have a pretty good sense of what's on your mind. Before I get into those questions, I do want to call out that today is the anniversary of the Watergate break-in, June 17th. 1972, when operatives working for the team of President Richard Milhous Nixon broke into the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in the Watergate complex to bug it. Nixon was very concerned about information coming out about him before the 1972 election. And that from there became the Watergate scandal that in 1974 led to the resignation of an American president for the first time in our history. All right, I always think that that's an important date, especially because nowadays the things that lawmakers are willing to simply accept from the current president makes Watergate, which was a huge scandal and a really important deal, seem sort of quaint. Anyway, the real question that seems to be uppermost in people's minds is a publication that has been circulating that alleges that there was tampering with vote counting machines in the 2024 election. And I want to say from the top here that there are very good people who do election security. There are very good people who look over the numbers for an election and evaluate whether those numbers are realistic or not. And there are very good people who look into discrepancies. And I am none of those people. I have no more information and have no more access to information than anybody else does. And we should all pay attention to what those experts say. Where you are getting this information is from, as I say, this document that's circulating that does have some basis in fact. It appears to be based on a lawsuit that is coming to us out of Rockland County, New York, in which a third-party candidate claims to have gotten more votes than were recorded in that county, especially in the town of Ramapo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So what's happened is that a group is suing the county board of elections in Rockland County, claiming that this third-party candidate should have gotten more votes. But in the looking at those votes, they allege that in some of the county, including, as I say, in Ramapo, there were no votes for Vice President Kamala Harris in the 2024 election, although there were votes for other Democratic candidates like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. So they are suing the Board of Election for a hand count over that third-party candidate, and obviously they're hoping to look into whether or not there was any discrepancies in the presidential election of that year. The election board says all of this is baseless, and all I can say to this is that, we'll see. But at this point, I think unless somebody shows you really hard evidence, somebody, as I say, some of those experts who do this for a living, I would not get terribly exercised about this information. One of the things that I have looked at more closely are the many comments coming from people like billionaire Elon Musk and from President Donald Trump about that election, which seem to me to represent at least some questions about what happened. But that's not the same thing as this document, which alleges a plot without, as near as I can see, anything other than events that happened near each other. So that's the best I can do on that. I did want to call out a couple of other things. One of the things that we are all sort of on tenterhooks about are the many comments that we have seen from the Trump administration and from President Trump since Israel launched an attack on Iran on Friday, attacking Iran's nuclear sites. And I'm not going to get into that struggle itself, but I'm going to get in a little bit here to what that means for American domestic politics, because Trump and the administration appeared to have been caught flat-footed when Israel struck. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is also acting as the Director of National Intelligence, he's got a lot of hats, put out a statement saying that the U.S. was not part of that attack and hadn't been informed of that attack. The Israelis said, in fact, we had been. But shortly after that, Trump started to say, well, of course, we did know about it. I mean, it's all very murky what's happening there, but it shows a number of things. First of all, I think it shows that foreign affairs are moving away from the US. The US is not the player that it was even 4 or 5 months ago. And it no longer has the kind of influence that it had. Obviously, Prime Minister Netanyahu had wanted to attack Iran in the previous two administrations and had not done so. This time he felt he could do so under Trump. So it means that foreign affairs are moving away from the United States, but it also comes at a really important time domestically for the United States, because over the course of the last, well, several weeks, but certainly over the last weekend, Trump has been shown to be really much weaker than he claims that he is and that he wants to project that he is. And this event has given him the ability to try and insist that he's the deal maker and he's the person calling the shots. And since last night, which would have been Monday night, or maybe shortly after Sunday. I kind of lose track of when the Truth Social posts come in. He has been talking and saying really extreme things like people should evacuate Tehran. Well, Tehran is more than 9 million people, 16 million in the metropolitan area. Evacuating that many people is, I mean, it was just shocking that he said such a thing. He's also suggested a number of things indicating that he is trying to represent that the power of the US government rests in him and that he is going to use that really freely. What that's going to lead to, I don't think anybody knows. He's been a real loose cannon lately. And the term loose cannon actually comes from naval history, when the cannons aboard a ship were actually chained down because of the recoil from when they were fired. And if those chains broke, a loose cannon was a cannon that was no longer chained to the deck, and a recoil would send it smashing through everything else on the deck. And those were usually, by the way, in the middle of the ship, not at the top of the ship. So it means you don't know what's going to happen, what's going to go next. And I really love that expression because I think it really brings on what a loose cannon really is. But when we are thinking about that and what Trump is trying to project to people and what his own injured sense of self needs to project to people, it's also worth remembering that the MAGA movement is bitterly divided about the idea of the US intervening in a foreign conflict, especially in this way. And you will remember that there are those America Firsters who insist that the US should not get involved. And then there are other people who are simply loyal to anything that Trump does, like Laura Loomer. And then there are others who are Christian evangelicals who really believe that the coming of their new future is centered in the Middle East, and they are hoping for some major American intervention. And you see that, for example, with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, a former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who has been posting to Trump things that really seem to encourage him to get involved in this struggle between Israel and Iran. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of context there that is not reflected only in the sort of normal stuff you're seeing, I think, in accounts of blow by blow what's happening in between Iran and Israel right now. There's also something big that I want to call out that has gotten a lot of attention, but I want to make sure it gets more attention. And that I've talked about before, and I had, outdoor journalist Wes Seiler to interview to talk about this. And last week I interviewed former Senator John Tester from Montana about this. But the story of the Trump administration's attack on our public lands has gotten even more extreme. So what has happened is that we knew that in this budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans are desperate to pass, there was a requirement for the sale of up to 3.3 million acres of land. and that it was mandated in the budget reconciliation bill. And there's any number of reasons why this is simply a handoff to oil and gas, real estate interests, and possibly ranching interests, not least that our public lands actually make money for the American people. They don't lose money. But the idea is to sell these off and use the profits from that sale to pay off the deficit. And the problem, and the theory is that that will be good for the American taxpayer. But the reality is that will take away this actually incredibly valuable set of public lands that do actually produce money for us every year. This would be a one year deal once they're sold off. But also, it's pretty clearly a handoff to big business of American assets. The other thing that I don't like about the sale of public lands is that our public lands currently support small businesses. They support mom and pop industries, and those sorts of industries, especially in rural areas, enable the preservation of democracy because people don't have to work for some company or some mining interest or some real estate firm or in the real estate that it produces. Instead, they have their small organizations or their small businesses that enable them to, support themselves, maybe hire one or two people, and really create the basis for fairness and for democracy. And one of the things that has always happened in the American West is that it has tended to be monopolized by a very few major players who monopolize first the resources and then the government, and then nobody else can get a foothold. And that seems very much what's going on here now. Anyway, we knew that in the bill there was a requirement for the sale of about up to 3.3 million acres of land, an area a bit smaller than the state of Connecticut. But since then, the Senate Energy and National Resources Committee, headed by Senator Mike Lee, who's a Republican of Utah, and the guy who's in such hot water over his making fun of the shootings in Minnesota last weekend, along with Senator Steve Daines, who's from Montana, a Republican from Montana, have added an amendment to the budget reconciliation bill that authorizes the sale of 258 million acres more than that 3.3 million acres over the next 5 years. It includes Bureau of Land Management land, and they manage all different kinds of U.S. recreation areas and wilderness areas and so on, and U.S. Forest Service lands in 11 states. Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. You will notice there that Daines has managed to exempt his own state of Montana, where this is enormously unpopular. But in these 11 states, this would authorize the sale of those public lands of 258 million acres of them over the next 5 years. Now, currently, that does not include national monument lands, and national monuments are lands that have been protected for historic, prehistoric, or scientific interests. So that's going to be, the most obvious of those is the Grand Canyon, although we have many of them. Currently, those are not included, but the Department of Justice under Trump is arguing that a president has the right to revoke protections that have been afforded to national monuments. And the reason for this is because Trump and his people want significantly to reduce the land that people like President Joe Biden put into protection as national monuments. So if in fact they prevail, and there are indications that the Supreme Court doesn't necessarily think that's a bad idea, in fact, these sales could include the national monuments. Right now it doesn't, but they could. And again, this is an issue that I think Americans care deeply about. We do not want our public lands sold off. And yet they're trying to do this under the budget reconciliation measure because they can do it with just a simple majority under budget reconciliation. They cannot do it under the normal procedures of the Senate, where a filibuster could stop something like that. So this is something really important to have on your radar screen and to recognize that it's there. Now, the other thing and the other reason that the administration is pushing the budget reconciliation bill as quickly and as hard as it is, remember they have said they want it signed by July 4th, is because it has significant money in it to beef up the border protection and immigration, customs, and enforcement of the immigration policies of the Trump administration. Because right now, ICE has spent so much money that it is virtually out of money, which by itself is illegal. You're not allowed to spend more money than you've got in the government. They're not supposed to be able to do that. They're running out of money, and they desperately want an injection of more money so that they can increase the deportations that apparently White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller wants so badly. He wants to have a million deportations in Trump's first year in office, and they're running terribly, terribly behind, which is why you are getting these huge sweeps in which they are threatening people and taking people who are here legally. And today there has been an attack on yet another elected official by agents that appear to be ICE agents. I'm a little vague about that still, because they're all masked and they're not wearing badges and they're not wearing names. So for all I know, it's somebody they yanked off the street. But that is something I think we need to clear up. Anyway, the budget reconciliation bill gives ICE and border protection a lot more money than they've got. Significantly, it also dramatically beefs up the funding to the U.S. military to almost $1 trillion, or about $1 trillion, which is a significant jump. And as observers have pointed out, right now, the U.S. military is primarily involved in attacking the U.S. So that's another reason that they want to get that bill through very quickly. It's probably a very good thing for you to be speaking up against those measures, as well, obviously, as the ones I've talked about so much. The cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to SNAP, the cuts to the clawback of money from the Inflation Reduction Act, and the cuts to energy rebates to enable people more easily to convert to forms of energy and appliances, for example, that are better for the environment. So there's a lot going on that front as well. And it's happening, one of the things that I find really overwhelming is it's happening all so much and so fast. So in fact, I feel like when I write my letters every night, I can't even begin to cover the material that's there. And do remember that this is a deliberate strategy to exhaust us, to make us feel overwhelmed. And that especially now, as you're seeing more and more, especially threats from the radical right and from the Trump administration, that's because they know how enormously unpopular they are. Polling for the administration on both issues and personalities is underwater on every single issue. Trump is deeply unpopular. His policies, including deportations, are deeply unpopular. And you saw for yourself over the weekend, people really are turning out not just to stand against the Trump administration, but to stand for American values and the things that we care about. So I'm gonna leave you now somewhat shorter than I normally would, because I do need to actually prep for an interview I'm doing tonight. But it's a lot. I know it's a lot, and we're all exhausted. And I'm not going to use profanity, but you can imagine what I do when I've written all day and figure I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and then all of a sudden the news starts dropping at 8 o'clock at night. That's going to happen. It's going to happen more and more. Recognize that you are not alone. Find like-minded people and recognize that we're doing it. Judges are standing against the administration. Individuals are standing against the administration. Lawmakers are standing against the administration. The shooting in Minnesota, coming on top of the attack on Senator Alex Padilla of California, has made a lot of people recognize, even if they don't share the values of the Democratic Party, that they must stand against what this administration is doing to recover American democracy and to recover a Republican Party that can actually serve the American people. There's a lot of people involved, and as I say, they're bringing it. There's a lot of skin in this game, and we're doing it. So get out there, make your phone calls, stay at the local level and the state level and the national level. Keep speaking up. Keep. I almost said committing art, but one of the things that I find really powerful in this moment are all the graphic artists and the memes and the jokes. Somebody posted a poster for the No Kings protest the other day that I was crying. I was laughing so hard. That's the sort of thing we need, and we can all do that. So get out there and keep making your voices heard, even when you're exhausted. And when you're too exhausted, take a break, but come back because we'll be here. And the momentum really does feel like it is running against the Trump administration at this moment. And I got to say, on June 17th, 2025, as I say, the anniversary of the Watergate break-in, that's music to my ears. Thank you for being here. I will be live as normal on Thursday, and we'll just keep on getting it done. Thanks for being here.